Good morning. This is Dean Morgan, and I'm from MorganSoft, and I am here to continue the PowerApps Mastering Forms. This will be part 2, and we will go into some more advanced features of PowerApps, so stay tuned. We'll get started with that right now. Now, as you can see, this is the form that we were working with previously. And as you can see, the form is pretty sparse. It works, but not very well. It works only insofar as we have the buttons set up. We have pending status is able to be changed by the user, which we don't. Obviously, we wouldn't want to do that. If we go to approvals, you'll see that we have approvals set up, but we need to have a few additional things. We have some things going on here. There's just not a lot set up on this, and we want to improve upon this. So let's go to the new version of this. Now, we're going to open up the travel request app, and that way we can take a look at what I've done in the meantime to improve the app. And I think you'll agree that it certainly looks a lot better and will perform a lot better, have a lot more functionality for you as expected. But I'm going to go over the various code pieces that I have added in for this, and you'll see what difference is and why that makes a big difference. So we're going to look at it for just a minute. We're going to run it, and you'll notice that the first thing that you see is that we have my name and a role next to it, and we'll discuss that role in a little bit. The next thing that you'll see is that we have the buttons that previously were just buttons. We now have them across the top, and again, they will have some additional functionality that you'll notice. Now, this first screen in the application also has a drop-down, which currently shows pending, and that's the default value of it. These are my pending travel requests. And then I will go to approved, and you will see that it filters for this and then rejected. So it has the ability to show us what we have. And this is only for my particular pending requests. Now, if we go into, again, some changes, we went into request, you'll see that the first thing we see is a new travel request. And if we scroll down, you'll see the approval status is not set, but it is grayed out as well as requested by. That's because when we request a travel request, we want it to be an approval status pending. We don't want the user to approve their own travel requests. So we're going to put that into pending status when we create it. And then we don't want someone putting in someone else's name for a travel request, because obviously that would be not a proper thing to do. So as you can see, when we came in, when we clicked on the request button, we had new travel request. Now, when I go to this conference, for instance, you'll notice that the conference turned green, and that is because it has been approved, right? You'll also notice that save button is now grayed out. And the reason for that is we don't want, once a conference or once a travel request has been approved or rejected, we don't want the user to go back in and change that request because it's already been approved. Right? So we don't want them saving that request. If they need to change something, then that will be a different screen that we will build later. So you'll notice that at the top, this says edit travel request. And if we go back to request, we now have new, right? That gives us the ability to dynamically change what we're doing based on this, right? So when we go into Christmas trip, which is in a pending status, we get to the ability to save that and then change it as needed. Now, we want to go back into approval and take a look at this. And again, we have the ability to approve and reject these. And as we look at these, you'll see we have a request here by Alex W. So I put in a request for another user under that user's name so that we can then go in and look at what the application looks like under that user. Now, when you go back and you look at the difference here, we did not have all of these things input And it would be, again, a better way of approaching it to do the way it is now. So let's talk about the different things that have been done and how you can implement some of these yourself. So the first thing to talk about is just what we discussed, which was my name and the role. So let's look here, and then we're going to zoom in so you can see code behind on this. All right, so I'm doing the function concatenate, and that function concatenates the string welcome and then a space. Always put your spaces into the string or add a space by doing quotes and then a space, because the concatenate on the string will take exactly the string that you put in. So you want to add your spaces in there, and you'll find out if you do it one time, you'll find out what that entails. So we put in welcome, and then we put in the function user, and that user parentheses gives you the logged in user. So that's very important, because that is a way that you can identify who it is that's coming into the app at any one given time. So you use user parentheses and then do a dot, and you'll see that in this case I'm putting in full name, and then I'm appending another parameter to it called user role, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So essentially, I'm creating that string, the welcome Dean Morgan Sr. Supervisor. Now we're going to go in and we're going to look at where the role gets set up. So we're going to go to the screen. This is the screen home. That's the first screen in the app. And then we're going to go to on visible. And again, I'm going to zoom in so we can look at the code. And I use the set function to create a variable called user role. And so when I create this user role, I want to apply to it a value. And that's how I got the supervisor value. And I got the supervisor value by using another function called Lookup. And I'm looking into a called user list. And that user list has a field in it called email. And I'm comparing that email address to my user.email and then returning role. And that's how I got that. I populated that variable. And we want to use variables in this way to look up different things, especially things that you're going to be using on a regular basis, right? So the role in here will be used for various things. So we want to set that pretty much out of the gate when the user starts. Now there's various ways of doing this, and we can certainly look at the different ways of doing this. I just happen to set it in the visible on this, right? So we have now got the username, we've got the role, and the next thing we want to talk about is the navigation. So the navigation, as you can see, is all in one app, and it is a component, and it's comp_nav_1. Now, that's because the instance of this component is on this screen. Now, if we go to another screen, screen approval, and we click on that component, you'll see that the name of the component is now comp_nav_3. And the reason for that is we've added that component to each one of our screens. So you'll see there's that. And so we want to look at the components and show you what a component is. So when you create a component, it is essentially another screen, but it is a screen that is formatted and can be used in a particular way. So let me explain. So when we create this screen, we want to put on the pieces that we want on it. And in this particular case, we have two different galleries. And as you can see, we will look at the icon for gallery 3, and we see that we have an icon and a label, right? So we have the home, and this, if you remember on galleries, we have a template, right? And then we have another record that may be different. So to populate these galleries, we've actually created when we go back to our screens and we look at the app, we'll look at under app, we'll look at app on start, and we will look at the on start collection there. So let's zoom in a little bit and take a closer look at this code. This is another function, clear collect. And what this is doing is essentially taking these values and it's collecting it into a table. And that way we can use that table in memory to do different things. In this case, we're going to create a navigation for our application. And so we collect that into the collection called call_nav. And the reason we're doing a clear collect is that we want to clear out the records in this table every time the app starts. So every time the app starts, we'll get the new values in this table. And the value of that is that when we do that, we can then add additional values to it. And as the users come in, they will get the ability to see the new data. So we have this clear collect, which does a collection. And each one of this is essentially a column in that table. So the column is visual title, and that's the column name. And then the value on each is home or request or approval. And then this icon is actually an object called icon.home. And then, of course, icon.add and icon.check for the different pieces. The screen is also an object. So when we select the screen, we want to select the screen itself in this component. And so what we're doing here is we're building this navigation table to populate our component. And so we have each one of these in our gallery. So when we create the gallery and we pull it in, now again, I want to show you the code on this. So we're using the filter function against the call_nav collection, and we're filtering output for permission equals all. And the reason we're doing that is because we want every user that comes into the application to have these particular pieces available for them to use. If they're not a supervisor, they should not have the approval, right? Because if I'm not a supervisor, I should not have the ability to even go to the approval page, to the approval screen. Now, if I go down into group 2 and I look at the icon and the label, you'll see that it only has approval in it. And the reason for this is that I've done the filter here, again, with permission equals supervisor. And so we'll log in as the other user in just a moment and be able to see how that shows up in our screens. But just know that when you are doing a component and you want to use pieces like the screens that are in your application, there's one thing that you have to know about on this screen, and that is the properties of the component. And so let's zoom in on that. And the one thing I want you to keep in mind is the access app scope, right? This is turned off by default. If it is turned off, you will not be able to access properties or the values or the apps, the objects within your app. So it will be outside of the scope of your app. So if you turn that on, you will be able to use the screens and so forth that you need. Now, one thing, we do have custom properties here that you could do this navigation with a custom property and set up the properties that way. We have essentially done a set of permissions to allow people to come in, and what they do is defined by this code. Right, so let's zoom into that again, start at the beginning. So we do the function, and then we're looking at this item.screen, which you remember in the gallery, we identify which screen or which item we're on by this item. If we click on an item in the gallery, so there might be a whole list of different items in the gallery, but when we click on it, we want to make sure that we identify the particular item. So when we're looking at this item.screen, we are specifically asking for the item that we just clicked on. Now, if the item we just clicked on is the screen CR input, then we want to create, so we're doing if this is true, then this will be what happens, right? So if this is true, then we're creating a new form input and we're resetting the gal request lists, and we are navigating to this item.screen, right? Because that's the item that we picked up. We are using a screen transition of fade. And so that's what happens if it is input. Now, if it's not SCR input that we've clicked on, then we just navigate to this item.screen with the screen transition as fade. So you can see that with the if statement, I can change between what I do on one, depending on where I'm at, on any of these applications, right? So, and you can see, again, we have the same code in this template, so that if I'm clicking on request and it will take me, which is input, it will take me to that request and it will start a new request. So I know this is a lot to take in. That's only part of it. Right? So we have several different pieces involved here. So let's take a look on this screen at the DD status, which is the status that we have, so that we can then filter by that status. So we've created a list here, right, in the code of the values we want in this dropdown. So when we select that particular item, then what will happen is it emits that particular value, and we filter. Again, we're using the filter function, and we use it against travel requests, and we're filtering for approval status dot value equals the dropdown status dot selected dot value, right? Because we want whatever this value is to then filter that list, right? And then, as you can see, we can have a filter that just doesn't do one value, but does a second set of values. So if we go over here, we can see this second set of parameters. So the second set of parameters in this filter is requested by equals user.email. So you can see that this list is now, not only is it filtered by this dropdown, but it is also filtered by who I am. And that becomes very important because you only want your users to see what they need to be able to see. So let's go to the request page. Again, as we discussed with the component, we set that up in the component so that when we go to request, we now have a new travel request. And we want to be able to look at our requests and know that we can only change those that we have rights to change, right? So let's look at what drives that. And again, I want to go back to the gallery. This is the gallery. You can see it's gal request list. And I want to go back to the icon here that will show us what happens. And because you remember, I said that in a gallery, this is the template. This is the only one you'll be able to change. If you click anywhere else on the gallery, you won't be able to change anything. But if you click on this in this template, you can then change anything you want to change in that template. And each of the records that go through the gallery pick this up across each one and change the values for this template. So if we look at the value or the code for the selection button on the template, look at the code. And one of the things that we almost always do with a button is that we will put in a select parent. And that allows us to select the specific form or the specific row in the gallery that is being selected. So it selects that record for us to then act upon. And so what we want to do is we want to select that record, and then we're going to put the form into edit mode. So we're doing edit form, which is another function on this particular form, and then we're updating the context. Now, if you remember, the button turned dark red and the value of the text on the button changed from submit to save. And so that's how we change the button text and button color to update that context. Now in the second piece, and each time you have each row, each thing that you're writing is separated by a semicolon. Always write your code and then separate it by a semicolon. And generally, as a good tip, is when you start to write your function, your set of functions. If you have nested functions, write the innermost function first and then nest it with additional functions on the outside of it. It makes it much easier to write a fully functional set of nested functions when you're doing this, right? So as an example, we have this if statement, and I wrote this this piece right here first, and then I put the if statement on the outside of it. And then I could go in and add in my parameters. So if this item dot approval status dot value equals approved, and this is the or identifier. You don't have to put in the word or, you can put in two parallel bars, and or this item dot approval status dot value equals rejected. So if it's either one of these, it can be one or the other, right? It can be either one because it's an or. And that's one thing you want to learn, is how the values in an if statement work. You can have this and that means both need to be, or this or that, where they can be one or the other can be true, right? Or this, not that, means that one is true and one is not. So there are various ways of setting these up. I'm doing an or here, and if either one of these is true, then you'll see that the button display that we've set up here is display mode dot disabled. And if neither one of these is true, that means it's in pending mode. It needs to be display mode dot edit. Now I know that these are a lot of things to take in, a lot of code to take in. And I want you to understand that just because you are not familiar with Power Apps, or it's low code, it's not no code, it's low code. So you have to get used to some of these functions, some of these events, and so forth. So what you need to do is I'm going to show you where to go to find out about this. So when we are in our browser, and I'm going to start another tab, I'm going to go in and I'm going to search for Power Apps and filter, right? And so the first thing that's going to come up is going to be Microsoft Learn. That's where you want to go, Microsoft Learn, and you want to click on the filter, and this will take you to a whole list of the various things that you can, the functions that you can use in Power Apps. Don't feel ashamed that you have to look up syntax. Sometimes even people who've been doing it for years still have to look up the syntax, right? There's nothing wrong with that. This gives you a lot of good information. One of the things I want you to notice is this applies to, right? So if we look in this, it tells you Canvas apps, which is what we're working on now. It also has desktop flows, model-driven apps, Power Pages, and Power Platform. There are a lot of different pieces that it could apply to. And you'll see that it has a video explaining, showing how to use filter and lookup functions. And so that, when you go down, and this is another piece, especially when you're working with SharePoint, is to learn about delegation, right? So there, what you want to know, this will tell you all about delegation, and it probably won't affect you until you get more than 2,000 records in a list, and then you will start to see where delegation becomes a problem. So on basic apps that you're working on, you won't ever see this as a problem. But you can see it gives you syntax and how you use this. And then it gives you examples. And this is always my favorite area, is the examples, because I can follow along. I can see how things are done and how they might be done in such a way as to make sure that I understand exactly how these should be used, right? So I think that's a very important function, a piece or page for you to have. As you can see, there are a lot of functions that you can utilize in Power Apps. And so I want you to favorite this page, save it in your favorites, and that way you'll always be able to get back to it and look up the functions that you need. So let's go back to the app. And as we've shown you, this is how we change the display mode of this button, because what we're doing is if we look again, if we go to display mode, you'll see because I've done a context variable as this button display, it will now change based on that button display. So that gives us the ability to do those things. So, and you might be asking, well, how do I do this? How do I make this approval status into a read-only, or how is it disabled? So when we go here and we look at this particular card, right? Or this particular drop down, and we look at display mode, I've simply set it to display mode disabled. And so it doesn't matter what the value of that approval status gets set to, it will show up, but it will not be editable by the user because it's in a disabled state. Again, another thing to keep in mind. So we want to go finally to the approval side. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to put another travel request in. And I'm going to put that travel request in as this account, this Alex right here. So I'm going to log in and I will be right back. So I'm back and I have this teed up. I've logged in as Alex W. And I want to show you what Alex sees. So let's transition over to that. Now, when Alex goes to make.powerapps.com, he gets a very similar experience that you would as you were creating the app. However, we've shared this app with Alex, and you'll notice when he goes there, he doesn't see the app at all. Now, this is something you need to, if your users are going to make.powerapps.com, that's something that they will need to be aware of, that if they go to make.powerapps.com with a shared application, then instead of my apps, which is what you see here, right? That's where we're at, is my apps. They want to go to shared with me, right? So when I go to shared with me, you now see that I have this travel app available as Alex W. But you'll also notice that this is grayed out, right? So that means I cannot edit this application. And the reason for that is because it was shared with me as a user and not as a co-owner. And we'll go over that when we get back to the app as my persona. Under this persona, all I can do is run the app. You see over here, it shows who the owner is, and it shows what kind of app it is. So if I go ahead and run this app, first thing you'll notice is I have buttons across the top. I have this that says Alex Wilbur all, right? So my role is all, but it's not supervisor. So therefore, in the button, in the component, the way I've coded it, I can get to home or I can get to request, but this is disabled. Approval is disabled. So that's as it should be because I'm not a supervisor. Now you can get, again, you can get as granular with this as you want to get. You can make a number of different roles and have each role have a different access to different areas of the app. It's entirely up to you. Whatever your business needs are on this. But I can go in and I can create another. So I'm going to create another travel request, vacation, and the destination is Africa. And the departure date is going to be April 30th, and the return date is going to be May 30th. It's a long way to Africa, right? So we're going on Safari, and you'll notice I can't put in the approval status, neither can I change the requested by, and that's by design. So we're going to submit this. I can now select it, and I can change those approval dates because it hasn't been approved or rejected yet. So that's of value. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to log out of this log back in as the supervisor, and we're going to approve this, and you'll see how that works. Back in a minute. So we are back after off and logging back on with which is Dean Morgan. And so the first thing we want to notice is, again, as we pointed out, because I am the owner of this, this app shows up under my apps and not shared with me, right? Because I am the owner of it and I have shared it with Alex Wilbur. Now, again, let's take a look, right? So now this is editable. And if I do share, see how this share works. And we talked about when you share something with someone, right? When you share an app, and this is how your users will be able to get into your app. So you need to pay attention to this. How do I create an app and I want to share it with someone? How do I share it with other people? And so you'll go in and you right click it and share. And then, so let's go back there again. You'll click on these ellipses and you'll do share. Share. And when you get here, you will add a name here. And so I'm going to add Diego Siciliani to this. Now, I want Diego to be a full-fledged co-owner. A co-owner can change the app. A co-owner can delete things in the app. A co-owner is essentially the same as I am that can go in and really change the app. And so when you're creating an app, generally do not want to be very many people at all to be co-owners, because you don't want your users messing the app up. You can restore it if they do, but it's not something that is a best practice. Now, it is a best practice to make at least one other person a co-owner. And the reason for that is if you were to leave your position, then no one would own the app. And when they disabled your account, the app wouldn't work anymore. So you want to make sure that you have at least one other co-owner, someone that you can trust, that will do that to help you with that. So let's go back to the share, and we've said we're going to give Diego access. We click on this eyeball, and you'll notice when we scroll in here, we can see user, right? Can use the app only, or co-owner can use, edit, and share the app, but not delete or change owners. So when you are you'll want to be users, again, one trusted person to be a co-owner. The other thing you want to do is here you can include a message to the user about what you're sharing with them and why. And the reason is kind of self-explanatory. If I get an email from someone and it says here, click this to start something, in these days, I most likely will mark it as spam or phishing and go on about my day. I won't know what it is. I won't understand what it is. So you want to make sure that you give some message in the email to explain to Diego what it is that he's trying to use. So if I click user, I can also go in, before I this, I can go in and click manage access, and I can see the groups that are available and what access they have. So I can remove access, I can change access to co-owner. I can see any other invites that are pending, and where access is going to be. So I can then share that, and now Diego Siciliano should have access to this app. So that's how you add, and as you can see, you have 500 characters in the message for you to be able to use. Just a second while it finishes the share. Okay, so we've travel the request to Siciliani, and it will come in as an email in his email box. And he can then, and if say Siciliani does not, we can go in and here, and it is a pending invite. There are no pending invites. Diego has accepted and we can now access the app. So what we want to do is we want to go into play this app. And again, that's how you play it. So now I'm in as myself, and I see my pending and so forth. But I want to go to approval because I actually have that available. And you can see now that Alex has his vacation. And so I'm going to look at his wedding. Like he's a month off in January, February, March, April, and then at the end of April he's taking all of May off for his vacation. I think what I'm going to do is, because his would really be mad if I didn't do so, I'm going to approve his wedding, and you see that it takes it out and immediately finishes that, and I'm going to reject his vacation. Now, before I reject the vacation, I'm going to get out of this, and I'm going to go in, and we're going to look at what was done to make it immediately remove from the, and I'll show you while that's loading. I will go to SharePoint, and I'll actually show you I put in another list within the site that you're able to see has the user roles in it. So we have the user list, that is a new list we've included. You can see that my is supervisor and Alex is all, right? So we have this list in addition to this, the travel requests lists here. And you can see that Alex in this vacation, he is still in pending mode, and it will be so we're going to go in and take a look at the approval list. And right now, Alex is going to be rejected. But if you go in and look at SharePoint at the specific list, then we should see that his wedding has been approved. And you can see that his wedding in Aruba for the month of March, May has been actually March, April has approved. April his has been approved, but his vacation is still in a pending state. So if we go back in and we look what is being done when we click on the various on these. Now you'll notice, so we go to the gallery, gal pending requests is the name of it. And if we go to this, we only can do the first row because it is a template. And we talked about that earlier. So we're going to look, let's zoom in on the code that allows us to patch the approval and reject. So the first thing we're going to do is, as I said, we're going to select the parent. That gives us the row that we're in. And then we're going to do the function patch. And if you think about patch is really a code-based way of just changing a very granular, very specific piece of the application, a very specific thing. You can use patch to change everything about this, right? But there's no need to do all of the pieces in this request. Only looking to change the approval status to approved or rejected. So what we're going to do patch, and we're changing the particular item in travel requests. And then the item that we are changing, again, if you look up patch on the functions, it will tell you, right? You have this is the source, that's where the trying to change, that's the list. And then this item indicates which item it is that we're trying to change. And then we have what we're trying to change is approval status. That's the field that we want to change. And then we have this embedded in it. So we have ID and then we have value approved. And the reason that we have the ID of 1 is because if we go to input screen and we look at the approval status, actually let's go to the actual list in SharePoint and look at it there, easier to see. But if we look at the approval status as a choice field, and we look at this approval status choice, you will see that it has 3 items, right? So it has 3 potential items. And these are, this is 0, this is 1, and this is 2. And so that's how SharePoint presents those for that choice list. You can't see them, but they're there. So in the order that that list is, you can count down 0, 1, 2, and 1 is approved, 2 is rejected, 0 is pending. So when we think about that and we go back here to this approval screen and we look at this again, zoom in, we say we want the ID as 1 because that's the in the list that we want to change, and the value is going to be approved. So we want to select the ID of 1 and the value of approved. Okay, and that's how we change. And in the same concept is in the rejected. Right, so you can see, and one thing that I haven't really mentioned is formatting of text, right? So this is just formatted in a slightly different way. it does exactly the same thing. So if we go back and we remove the formatting, you'll see that now has exactly the same thing, with the difference being that it is an ID of 2 and the value is rejected. Okay, so let's reject his here. We'll go in and we'll reject his vacation. And you'll notice again that it disappears from this gallery. And the reason that it disappears from the gallery is pretty simple, because we are filtering, we're using the filter, and the approval status dot value is pending. So when we change the value by approving or rejecting, it is no longer, that filter is immediate, and it changes what you see based on that filter. So because that immediately made a change, and if we go back to our list and we see, okay, let's go back to the travel requests, he should have a rejected, and he does. Here is his approval or his rejection for the approval status on his vacation. Now, so one of the things that we could do in the application would be to include for these approvals, when someone put in a request, it would then send out an email to request that approval from their supervisor as defined in the user's list. We could also put in an email when a trip was rejected or it was approved. So you could think of this, if we're talking about travel on this particular portion, we could also be talking about vacation. It's a vacation form instead of travel. We're calling it travel, but the same idea is in the same kind of way. So that is really kind of that I have changed. One of the things I did want to mention to you was in this screen, one of the things that I did in order to make this, you'll note screen container here is a vertical container, right? It is a vertical container, and that's directional. To make screen have what I wanted in it in the way that I wanted it. That was to have the label header and the DDC top, and then have this below. The reason I changed it to a non-directional container, to do that when you are in the screen, if I do insert and I go down to layout, then we will see that here in the layout, we have a horizontal container, we have a vertical container, and we have just a container, right? So these have different uses. Sometimes you want it to be a horizontal container, sometimes you want it to be a vertical container, and sometimes you want just a non-directional container. And then the other thing to point out here is you want to play with some of these, you can add additional galleries in from here. You can add additional media. You can add the ability to connect to a camera. So let's say that this is going to be a mobile app. You may want to be able to have your users use a camera in it, or a measuring camera or a barcode reader. There's a lot of things that you can do with this if you are creating a mobile app as well as a desktop app or an app that you'll use in your enterprise. So we're going to get out of this app. We're going to leave it. And I wanted to show you just a little bit about the here as well. And so you'll notice that we have a component where we could put, we can create library where we can then put the components that we want to reutilize, and we can reutilize them across apps. So that's a very important kind of this, right? So this particular component in so yes, no pop-up, but I wanted to the component that was within my travel request app and add it, I could certainly add it to this component library. And then we have a number of different pieces to this. So it's worthwhile kind of and playing with it. And I think on the next video, we're going to add some Power Automate into it, as look at the of moving this app over to a Teams app. Then instead of being based on a SharePoint list, will be based on a table. which you can see here. We have various tables that we can create. We create custom, we have a core table, right? We can see the tables here, and we can put data into them through the Power App. So stay tuned. I think you're going to really enjoy the next one. In the meantime, please like, share, and subscribe, as that will help our video stream grow, our channel. And so we appreciate you coming. We really do appreciate you coming and watching this. And we hope that in the future you will come back and view more. We'll be doing more with Power Platform and more across the Copilot Studio realm as well. So these are all great videos for you to watch. I think you'll really enjoy them. Thank you.